Welcome to the Journey 2020. I'm Charles Morris, happy to be here with you coming off the weekend. Hope you had a blessed weekend. Can you believe it that we're in the month of June? Also, I hope that you had a chance to check out Chill Mondays, The Sounds of Motown and More from Disney Springs. That was a great show. I plan to do more of Chill Mondays, so make sure that you stay tuned for that. Well, this is the Journey 2020. We've been coming to you since 2013. And usually around 7 p.m. on a Monday, we're visiting with you. And for questions, comments, or concerns, or you may have an idea for a show, you can always hit us up with an email, reach out to us. Also, be on the lookout monthly as we do the Pastors Roundtable. I enjoy doing that. So we always have a great message, always biblically based and biblically sound based. So we have some good people in our corner and our circle to give us some sound doctrine, which is so very important, especially it is so needed right now with all the mess that's going on and the killing and the shooting, and we not really understanding the times that we're in. So we need to hold on to something that is solid and to kind of change the people's hearts and their spirit. So make sure that you check out the Pastors Roundtable. It is so very important. Again, I'm Charles Morris. And also, before we really get into today's topic, a few weeks ago I had an interview which was on the show, going to the archives about a month ago. I had a friend of mine. I just want to share this with you because it's personal. I finally had him come on the show. I've been trying to get him to come on the show now for a period of, a couple of years. But he finally decided to come on the show, and I'm happy that he did. And my friend that I grew up with, I've been knowing him for many years, and he was addicted to drugs. And he's sharing with us how he came up out of that darkness. And so it was very personal for me. And even when I was doing the interview, as I heard it for the very first time on the show, I was doing everything I can for him not to see the tears in my eyes. Because, he went to places and he was in a dark place that I was just sitting there like, wow. But God pulled him up out of it. I keep him in my prayers, and I ask that you keep him in your prayers as well. His name is, I call him Wookie, his name is Gerald. So go and check out that show for me, but I say that in reference to see what God can do, right? So for today's show, can you believe that we're in the month of June? Like I said, it's like, wow. All right, summer's here. Officially, the temperature's in the 90s, where it's gonna stay for a period of time. And get ready for some beach and well, I go fishing all the time year round, so I won't get into that part. But, over a period of time, you know how you have somebody in your life and then you see them from time to time, and they're always on your mind, they cross your mind from time to time because of who they are, okay? Because there's certain people, when they touch you, that they stay in your heart, they stay in your mind because you really love their spirit. Well, on today's show, as I had on Joel Garris a few weeks ago, I mentioned this person and saying that he's coming on the show. As I talked about when I worked at the talk station, back then it was 740 Winds, I produced several talk shows, and I learned a lot from these shows. And one of the shows that I found out was very popular was this guy that everybody loves because he's magical in what he does. And he kind of touches something and then it just blossoms, right? Once I mention his name, you're gonna know who I'm talking about. And so when I called him, I knew he was gonna call me back. I got his voicemail. And I wanted to ask him to come on the show because a lot of you know him and have heard his voice, have seen him on television, and he's been around for a while. And so we're gonna get a chance to talk to him today, and that's Robert Vincent Sims. Everybody knows him as the Garden Rebel. So I want to say welcome to the Journey 2020. It is so happy to have you and to see you. I haven't seen you. How many years has it been?
We haven't seen you in many years. You were one of my first radio producers of the Garden Rebel show.
Right.
And you may recall we became instant friends. Like
right.
Within minutes, we were like close friends and felt the good energy and it's been fun and exciting.
Well, listen. There's a lot to talk about here. And I know that over the years, there's been a lot of things that's been that has transpired, and the thing of it is, I had no idea that you had kids. I mean, you just introduced
you knew
me.
me before kids.
Right. And so, how old is your oldest? And how young is your youngest?
Okay, I have two kids, a daughter, Ariana. She's 24, and my son is 26. They are both in medical schools, different medical schools, but they're thriving and doing well. And had I known we were so good at raising kids, I would have had more of them, you know. But on the second hand, on the other hand, two is plenty. But they've been good kids. It's been a joy to raise them.
Well, there's a lot more to this than what we're going to cover today. You know, I mentioned earlier that at the station I had produced several shows, and each show, you know, I learned a great deal. But I did learn a lot from the Garden Rebel and about plants and stuff like that, because he didn't know it, but I was actually taking notes. And to this very day, I still, even like for an example, he has several books out. And he doesn't know, but one of the books that I still have to this day, Vince, is that your book that you have for Christmas time, when you're trying to trying to make sure that your Christmas tree stays fresh.
Yes.
Yes. What's the name of the book?
Well, they're little booklets. They're not really fancy books.
Right.
They're called the Garden Rebel booklets, and we're actually not printing them anymore, so they're considered classics now. But what is unique about the booklets is like there's different ones. There was Garden Rebel Roses, Garden Rebel Natural Vegetables, Garden Rebel Azaleas, and there was a dozen of them.
Right.
And there was Garden Rebel Old Fashioned Tonics. And the entire concept of Garden Rebel came through a man who was one of not only the greatest gardener in the world. His name was Jerry Baker, and Jerry was the spokesperson for Kmart. He was the World Book Encyclopedia gardener, and we met accidentally and became best friends. And I became his protege at some point. Although we were very, very different personalities, but we just gelled as friends. And he's the one that named me the Garden Rebel. But the reason the word rebel is in there is because when I started all these years ago as a child, and all of the radio talk show hosts were government employees. They were county agents and things like that. And all they talked about was chemicals. So people would call in the show and they would say, well, you got to spray that with malathion, or you have to spray that with Dursban or diazinon, you know, which all they are diluted DDTs, you know. And it's like, how could these people be telling people to put poison on the vegetables they're going to eat? It made no sense to me, because I always used natural things as a kid growing up. Cow manure, Epsom salts, tea, coffee grounds, liquid dish soap, and it goes on and on and on. Because you know what? That's what our grandparents used, and our great grandparents. This is what all they had. You know, they couldn't go to the store and get 100 types of fertilizers and 100 types of chemicals like we have now. So the rebel part was, I was the rebel coming in there and telling people, look, you don't have to use the chemicals, you know, especially on the food you eat. And we need to treat our plants like we treat our kids, with tender, loving care. It's okay to give them the medication when they need it, but don't abuse it, and don't double dose anything. Not even the natural poisons, and they are poisons too. They're natural, but their toxicity is way, way, way low compared to the chemical company toxic chemicals.
You know, you would think that the show with Robert Vincent Sims, the Garden Rebel, that we would be talking about gardening today. Well, we're not going to talk about gardening today. We're going to have Vince come back on the show, and we're going to talk about gardening, because I know a lot of you would love to hear and be, I guess, educated on some things, and would have questions about a lot of your plants and gardening and vegetables and so on and so forth. When is the right time to plant this? When is the time to fertilize? When is the time to water? Is it too much water? What plants need this? Should they be in the shade? Should they be, I learned all that stuff. Plants that need to be in the shade, plants that need to have sunshine, all that stuff. So I don't remember to the T, but I remember a lot of the questions. Okay, but on today's show, he said, I want you to bring on a person who we haven't really seen yet, and that is France Neal. And because he heard a lot of her music and he has been inspired by her as well. And so he said, I want to hear her story. I want to hear who inspired her, just like you want to hear who inspired me. And so together, we probably can share some of our stories on today's show. So Vince said, come on, I want France to come on the show and I want to hear what she has to say.
And why you want to do this show first?
Well, I'm way more interested in learning about France than myself, because I have this natural affinity towards music. Behind the scenes, France and I have just been gabbing a mile a minute about all these inspirational singers, and I've been telling her my favorite singers, which are some of her favorite singers. We love Motown. I love Latin pop. You love Latin pop too, and so it's just fun. What it comes down to, in my specific case, there were 2 years that to this day were the most important years of my life, and that was my 9th year as a child and my 15th year as a teenager. And when I was 9 years old, we were living in Fort Lauderdale, and my parents were building a new house. And it was going to take a little less than a year to build the house, I believe. And so we moved in with my grandparents, who lived in Fort Lauderdale, which was probably a half hour from where our house was going to be. So it was a retired area in Fort Lauderdale, and it was a dead-end street, and not all of the neighbors, but all of the neighbors that I met were gardeners, and there was 4 of them. And when I look back now at these people, and I see the kindness and the time that they put into me, I look back and I think I had no idea of the magnificence of each of these individuals that all lived on that same street in Fort Lauderdale. They were all friends, but in this case of gardening, they were completely opposite gardeners, different gardeners. I'm going to give you specific examples. And my point is, I learned something about each one. Because they were all so different, with different personalities, but all fairly bold personalities. And I like that, because they don't hold back. Bold personalities, they put it out there, they ask questions, and that's kind of the way I was as a kid. And so right next door were the Halfords, next to my grandparents. And he was a vice president of the bank, and she was a gardener. And they also had exchange students. And my mother was always dragging me over to meet the exchange students. And I said, oh, Mom, I just don't want to do that. It's not something I want to. And she'd say, well, they're very beautiful. They're from Colombia. and I think you would enjoy it. I said, okay, I'll go. So it turned into be good experiences, meeting the exchange students. And they were lovely. So anyway, Halfords, they raised flowers. They had flower gardens everywhere. So I learned about the flowers and the butterfly attractors. And then across the street from them was kind of an elderly, crotchety guy named Mr. Martin. And he had a personality that was, he could be crotchety, that type of thing. Like one time he said to me, he says, now I'm going to give you this candy, just don't throw it on the yard. Like, I can remember being offended, because I'm thinking, why would he think I would do that? I would never do that in a million years, even as a kid, I had manners. But anyway, he had a good heart, and he had a formal garden. And back in those days, which he had like the concrete borders, which was unheard of. You see them now everywhere, the curvilinear concrete borders for beds. And everything was just prim and proper and gorgeous. And he was a really good gardener. And then there was another lady, Mrs. Fugate, and she gave me my love of birds. And she had a kiln. And so she taught me how to make clay, and we made a bird feeder. And my dad made this hook out of a clothes hanger and stuff like that. And so I got my love of birds for her. But at the end of the street, the most influential one was a man named Mr. Randall. And you know, I am known for low maintenance landscaping. This is what our whole company, Sims Landscape, is based on. The idea, let's make it pretty, let's make it respectable, but let's not turn it into an English garden that you need 3 gardeners. You can't afford 3 gardeners in these days. And so he had the right idea because he was more jungle-like, and Fort Lauderdale was very tropical, and he had this staghorn fern, and every plant he had just enthralled me. And so he taught me that, Vince, he says, you could just let these things grow and create your own jungle, and you create your own paradise. And that very much appealed to me, because stepping into his yard was like entering another planet of peacefulness. And there were more birds, and there was texture, and there was color, and it was just beautiful. And it was just all growing together as this jungle. And then he lived on the water, so he had potted plants along his deck, and it was really, really pretty. So that's a big group of inspiration right there that kicked off my 9th year.
Well, wow. The more you talk, the more you kind of understand, but I'm going to switch it up just a little bit. You find in life, you know, the older you get, the more you want to connect with people spiritually. And then when you're having those conversations, even when you walk away, you'd be like, wow, you know, it's a totally different type of vibe that you have when you're just having just a general conversation, or when you're able to talk with somebody that are spiritual. It's something totally different. And so one of the things that I know that God put in you was that you were able to take that and you were able to live through that and make that part of your purpose. And the thing of it is that a lot of people, God put a lot of the same things in them, but they don't connect the way that you did. But for you, you're able to take it, live through it, make it a success, but it's also a testimony.
They put up a barrier. And the real thought process is you have to understand you create the barriers.
Right.
There are no barriers.
Right.
We have to realize it's not the sky is the limit, the universe is the limit. There is no limit to our thinking.
Right. And see, and then because now with that, what you were saying, because I've never, as long as I've been knowing France, I've never really asked her who really inspired her. And so now I'm curious, so I can finally hear from her as you growing up, who really inspired you to to open the door that you opened, or even close the doors that you closed, for you to be molded and shaped into, because if you go ask anybody who knows her, they will all say the same. They will say exactly, she has such a kind spirit.
Oh,
she's
yes.
such a wonderful person.
And she has charisma, as I told you earlier.
Right. And then the thing of it is that it's funny because she teases me, or I tease her because of what I do, right? So she says, well, you give me the microphone and then you want me to do these things because I'm so used to her having the microphone. But if she has the microphone on stage, she can command the whole audience.
Oh,
now.
She lights up.
Right.
Yes.
And so she has this charisma on stage. And I don't even know if she knows it, but that's a gift that God gave her.
Absolutely.
So she has this gift when she's on stage that you have to pay attention.
You do. In fact, she and I talked privately while you were setting up, and we were saying that I love singers, and they have such fascinating stories, and many singers are connected to spirit in a very with a higher mindset, and so in her particular case, she was also born to do what she does. But what I love what she does, she's not inspiring one-on-one. She's inspiring hundreds or thousands in the audience because she plays some very, very big audience, and they can feel her energy, they can feel her vibe, or they vibe with one particular song that she does better than anybody they ever heard, you know, that type of thing. And so she's changing people's lives and making people happier. And when you think about it, what is a better trait than that? Making people happy. It's phenomenal.
All right. So I finally get to hear. Because I've never really asked you the question about what really inspired you, or who inspired you for you to open those doors that you opened to become the person that we know.
I think when it comes to any type of performance, you, if it's something that you just love, that you may be born to do, that first time at a very young age, you do something, and then you have an audience. My audience was my aunts, were my aunts and my uncles and friends, and then in school. And I didn't think anything of being an artist or a singer at that time. It's just that I liked that attention I got at that time as a child. I was like, wow, this feels pretty good. And then I didn't know that I was any good at it until I joined the choir at a very young age and started getting positive feedback from even my other classmates and whatnot. And it's funny because I was thinking of something earlier. I don't think a lot of people realize this, and not just me. A lot of performers, you know, get on stage and something happens. It's just an energy that you just feel and just love. It's not even about attention. It's just, you want people to feel what you're inside.
Like we talked about with Diana Ross.
Yeah,
She's electric. When in person and even through the TV, she's electric.
Exactly. So you want people to feel that. You're like, oh, can you feel what this music is? But a lot of performers are actually introverts. We're not, like a lot of us are not very outgoing or some are, you know, but many, if you know, are, but when they get on stage, there's just something that just
clicks.
It clicks. And it's not anything that's forced. It's just something that feels like almost magical. And as far as inspiration goes and singers, I mean, like I was telling you earlier, I grew up with a lot of Motown. My mom probably was my biggest musical influence because she gave me her 45s. I'm telling my age now. She gave me her 45s to play, so I would play everything. She liked all kinds of music, and that's probably why my musical tastes are so eclectic, because she loved the Motown, obviously. She loved Elvis Presley. She loved Frankie Valli. She loved Frank Sinatra. You know, just Dean Martin. You know, she had all these 45s, and she would actually let me play them. And I had this little teeny record player. And even like James Brown, you know, when in the 60s. And then, and I think probably as far as my love for music is probably my mom, as far as putting in me that love. Now, she doesn't sing at all. My mom does not sing. I think my father, I got that from, but she loved music, loved it. And that's what instilled that in me, so.
Well, you know, music is so transformative. That's why I was wanting to do this show with you, because, it's hard for me to find, a friend that's a singer, right? And I'm fascinated because of the connection you have with spirit, and then you transmit that, to the audience, and it's just such a positive vibe, that is created. And the thing we love about music too is, like for example, let's say that in my case, I'm able to play it in my truck as I'm driving home. Let's say that I've had a really hard day, which as a landscape designer at my age, every day is a hard day. And so, you're out there in the sun and you're moving around, and it's not like you're sitting in an air-conditioned office. So it's hard, especially June, July, and August. And so I will put on, let's say, KC and the Sunshine Band that I grew up with. And instantly, I'm happy. In other words, it transforms my mind from that exhaustive mind, and it goes to show you the power of the mind. And then you put on this happy music, and you're transformed instantly with that vibe. It's so interesting.
That is, I mean, that's such a beautiful, I mean, I love the way music transcends. I mean, I was speaking with you earlier. I mean, we know
Yes.
what's happening in the world right now with Ukraine and everything. And they did a story on TV, a news story with a gentleman. The first thing to greet these people when they crossed that border was a gentleman who had flown. No, he went from Germany. He has his piano on a bike. I think he's in a truck or something, but then he puts his piano on the bike and travels around. The first thing to greet them was music.
Yes.
Him playing, and it's beautiful. I mean, it can bring tears to your
Oh,
eyes.
it is. It's so soul touching.
Yeah.
I saw that on television, and imagine what that individual is doing. These people are beaten. They've lost. Some of them lost their families. They've lost their pets. Some of them have had children killed, and they've left everything. They're going to a new country. They don't know what's going to happen to them. They don't know where their next meal is going to come from. And this beautiful soul is there playing the piano, greeting them. You know, he's giving them hope. What that music, without words, is saying, we're going to beat this. We're not going to let evil win. We're going to overcome evil, and we're going to make it. And how do we make it? We do it one step at a time. They haven't had any food. They haven't had any water. But what they do, one step at a time, and they're crossing those borders. And God bless Poland and all the other countries that welcome them. You know, see, we've seen the great things of humanity. We've seen the horribleness of humanity, but we're also seeing the great things of it, and we have to pay attention to that too.
That is true.
Yes.
That is true. We don't focus on that as much. That's why that was such a hopeful story for me, because I was thinking, wow, what could I ever do? And then the next thing I see is this gentleman playing music. I'm like, music is, I mean, so it really is very powerful.
Yes.
It really is. And I thank God that he has given that to me to be able to share, you know, because I say every time I sing, I constantly say, oh, I'm so blessed and thankful. It's just a blessing.
But in you of all people, you know, the key word to our subject matter here today, Charles, is gratefulness. You know, when you recognize gratefulness in your heart, life becomes so much easier. It really does. What happens is people get in habits. Like they're not procrastinators. They're in the habit of procrastinating. And so what do? They just repeat it over and over and over. Well, we have minds. We have the ability to change our mind and in other words, it's okay to change our minds by looking through rose-colored glasses, so to speak. That's not a negative, that's a positive, because we all have a choice to see the world as dark and Gotham City, or we have our own world that we create, co-create with God and our angels, and this way we are able to create a happy life. But it's all our choice. And, you know, I grew up, I was very fortunate to grow up in a family with a very positive mother and a very positive father. And I surprised them because as a child, I started a nursery at the age of 9 years old, influenced by the neighbors that we talked about. And I had incredible family support. And that's important too, to have a support system to perpetuate the positive attitude, to have friends the same way.
I don't want to cut you off, but I want to ask you this question real quick.
Yes.
What did they say, or what was that like when you first started at the age of 9? Because I know parents don't wake up and go, well, you know, my son is going to start a nursery. So what was the feedback right away, immediately, when they saw you doing what you were doing? What was that like? I mean,
It was, I can tell you the exact moment, and I could see it in vivid detail. My father was, he was a nature person, and he would always be reading Field and Stream magazine. It was his relaxation. So we had a nice Florida room, and he would go back there in the evenings after work. He had a paint and body shop, really hard working guy. And he was reading this, and I walked up to him and I said, Dad, I have a question. And he took his glasses off, and I said, Dad, I have a question. I would like to start a nursery, a plant nursery. And I said, I would like to have a little place in the back corner where I can just grow my plants, and I want to grow them in cans. I'm going to do Campbell soup cans, were my first pots and stuff like that. And he was quiet and he listened, and I didn't know what he was going to say. And he said, "Son," and he paused, like one of those long Paul Harvey pauses, and he said, "You can take the entire backyard, you can take both side yards. You don't need a little spot. You just can't take the front yard." And that's a positive answer, you know.
Right,
so
yeah.
that gave me the confidence to go gung-ho. And I was a gung-ho kid, and I got the go-ahead from parents. And they told the Miami Herald, my father said something that is the greatest thing a father could say to his son. And they asked him, what did you do to have this industrious kid that starts a childhood nursery that grew to 2 acres as a teenager? And he said, honestly, we look back in awe. We didn't do anything. He says, my wife and I got together and we said, turn him loose and let him do his thing. And they didn't get in the way. They encouraged me. They didn't try to change me. They didn't try to stop me or anything like that. And just to go back briefly, there was another huge turning point that I thought of through this story. My family, it was me and my best friend, Paul, in the back seat, and we were coming up from Fort Lauderdale to Central Florida, and we had a little cottage on a lake, and we would go fishing and whatnot. And out of the blue, my mother turns around, and she says, "Boys?" And then we turn around, and we're like, "Yeah?" She says, "Listen, I got to talk to you." She says, "This is a," what did she say? It was this is a do-it-yourself weekend, something like that. And I said, "What does that mean?" She says, "What it means is you guys have your bikes, you do anything you want to do, be safe, and the main thing is to be safe and just have a good time, and we're going to do the same thing. And there's only one rule this weekend." And I said, "What's that?" She says, "You can't ask us for money." And that shocked me, and that stopped me in my tracks. Like, what do you mean I can't ask for money? I'm 10 years old at this point. And so it was like a scene in a movie, and I became very quiet. Paul became quiet, and I just thought the whole drive. I don't think I said a word the rest of the drive. What could I do? And I came up with the idea of growing the plants in Campbell soup cans, and then I could sell them to the nurseries down the street. And that's what I did. And that's what had she not say that, I might be an accountant in a cubicle or something, you know. But
why do you think she did that, or why do you think she said there's only one rule, you can't ask me for money? Where did that come from? What was the concept behind that?
I think that she knew the way kids were, and we want, and they were determined parents to make sure that I didn't get everything I wanted, okay? But I was determined to manifest everything I wanted. Right. If I wanted, like I loved Fila, the Italian Fila, and I was inspired, I met him too. I was inspired by Evel Knievel. And he was in these beautiful red, white, and blue things, and he was so cool on that motorcycle. And he lived in Fort Lauderdale on the Intercoastal. And so I said, you know what? I want to get a jacket just like Evel Knievel. and so I had to make money on my own because I knew my parents weren't going to give it to me. And that's what I did. And then when I moved up to Central Florida at the age of 20 after I got out of college, my parents took an early retirement and they took over my nursery. And they just stepped into this beautiful nursery and they did a great job with it as well. So, you never knew that story.
No, I didn't. But before we go any further, I can't go without France telling her story about when she went to concert and she took a mom. Won't you tell her that story about the handshake?
Tell that story. Oh, well, No, I don't want to tell that story.
Tell it. Come
It's
on.
not. It has
some-
nothing to do with
Give us
anything.
some- He thinks it does.
No,
what
it's
was
a
that?
cute story.
Oh my goodness! No, because I gave my mom for her birthday. I gave her tickets to go see Paul Anka. I didn't really have any desire to see Paul Anka, even though he was one of the 45s that I would play as a kid growing up.
That's why I want you to tell the story, mainly.
So it was
right?
mainly for my mom to go. And I ended up having a better time than she did because I didn't realize Paul Anka is such a showman. He's not just a singer. That was one of the best concerts I've ever been to in my life.
Really?
I mean, he had the full orchestra, with the harp.
And when you saw him, he was in his 80s.
Paul Anka, he was probably, I would imagine he was in his early 80s. This was a couple of years ago.
Right? But you're making the point that age doesn't matter.
Oh,
You know what
no,
I mean?
yeah.
His natural neon, like you have and like so many entertainers have, shines through at any age.
Oh, yeah. Like Frankie Valli I saw last week is 87, and it was just magnificent.
Yeah, she said he's 87,
80, Paul.
so and he's sounding great.
But Paul Anka, I love because he didn't just he had like a screen up there, and he did like a duet, like how the whole Natalie and Nat King Cole, where he sang with Frank Sinatra, where he was on the screen, and then he told stories because I didn't know that he was like. I didn't know a lot about Paul Anka. I didn't know he was a writer, that he wrote My Way for Frank Sinatra when he was retiring, and then the song became so huge that he came out and retired. He never retired.
Sure.
But he was saying it because I enjoyed the concert more than my mom, and then when Paul Anka was walking around the audience, he came and he shook my hand.
Right.
So my mom was not happy that he shook my hand. He did not shake her.
Yeah, she waits her whole life to shake his hand. And he's right there. And he goes to the right.
Exactly. I was on the right, exactly. I was right where you are.
That's funny.
So she's still not happy about that one.
Right.
But she did enjoy the show. I think because I think I just probably enjoyed the show a little more.
Right. We were gabbing about show business behind, and we were both huge Dolly Parton fans. I mean, the world is a Dolly Parton fan. What's not to like? And the entertainers are so fascinating to me because, like in the country singers, they all grew up so poor, like Dolly did, and I mean like in a cabin with no electricity, and this incredible talent comes out that's like an angel, and I believe they're guided by angels, surrounded by teams of them, to create someone like Dolly.
That's true. Yeah, I believe that too. Even with writing music, like I guess artists sit down and try to collaborate, but a lot of times it's just given to you. It's like from somewhere you don't even know where it came from. If you don't get it down right then, it's gone.
Yes.
So that's
So
how
true.
it is true. So I can imagine any artist would say that, just that thought. It's something here. I want you to have this, and so. And of course there are the ones like the Dollies and like the Princes and all. They get so much. I mean, just and it's never ending.
And even the Beatles, some of those songs were written in a few minutes.
Yep, exactly.
And they didn't change a word, but that is the spirit coming through as they got it.
Yeah.
What neither one of you know, I don't think you know this, that I, as a hobby, write love songs. You didn't know that, right? Okay. So I haven't written in years, but when they come to you,
Yeah, exactly.
they come to you, and you reminded me. I had one instance where I heard a song in the gym. Something clicked in my mind. I created a song, and I said, I have to remember this line, and then the rest will come.
Exactly. Just get that part down.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So here I am, continuing to do the gym, and then I remember the line. I get to the truck. I have hardly nothing to write on. I find a little piece of paper, and I'm writing. I wrote the whole song there in the parking lot.
That's funny how that is sometimes. That's the same
That
thing.
spirit.
Yeah, that song, Just a Little More Time, that I'm playing on the guitar. I was leaving the Villages, and it came to me coming out of the restroom, and I pulled over into a motel parking lot, and I finished that song. There are other songs that don't happen like that. It takes a little more time, but that was one that came.
Yes.
At that motel parking lot in like a matter of 20 minutes, and I continued on my way home from my gig.
Well, I can see right now we need to collaborate. We need to write a hit.
Yeah, exactly. A big one. Yeah.
I think we could do it.
Yeah.
With your voice? Are you kidding? Of course we'll do it.
No,
I like that.
and actually, what's funny was because Michael Jackson said the same thing. They was interviewing him, and he basically verbatim said the same thing. And he said he has to write it down, and God give it to him. Especially, he has to do it before he give it to Prince.
Before God gets it to Prince.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
So he said, yeah. So I have to write it down, and you know, because I have to do this because he's probably going to give it. And he was using Prince as an example.
I never heard that. That's
right?
so
Yeah,
funny.
Yeah.
I know. There's so many transformative figures in history. Elvis, that changed people's lives, and the Screaming Girls, and then but Elvis has these incredible gospel songs that are flawless. And at Christmas time, we've got Elvis on, and we have Diana Ross on, and we have country singers on. We alternate. It's great.
Yeah.
Well,
you know, Elvis was influenced by, just watched a great documentary, Rosetta Tharpe was a guitar player, and rock and roll like guitar player, and that was one of his biggest influences musically. And I just learned this recently because I just watched a documentary like a week ago. As far as, yes, but when you watch her, you could see, not the movement, but like when you watch her singing, you could see how that would have been an influence for him.
Sure.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, you know an old-time singer that I have a feeling you like too, is Roy Orbison.
I love his voice. What a beautiful
Can't he
voice.
do like many octaves, right?
He's got a crazy range. There was there was a concert on PBS. This was a while ago that they played to him, and he's just was gifted. You know, just with that voice, beautiful.
Yeah, it just flows like a well. It's like non-filtered. It's straight from God to you. You know.
Effortless.
Yes.
Effortless.
Vince, I know there's so many people out there that you have touched over a period of years and years, especially with your personality, but the whole thing of with just nature itself, with something as you're doing what you're doing with the landscaping. But when you speak, it's just so funny because whatever that is that God gave you, that's in you, it just all seems to go together. It just, in that whole realm of just who you are.
Well, he had a plan.
Right.
And I jumped on the magic carpet ride that he provided the magic carpet. And my mother would always tell a story that she took me to the doctor and she says, there's something wrong with this baby. It doesn't sound very good, does it? And he's like, what's the matter with the baby? She says, he doesn't cry. And he says, what do you mean he doesn't cry? She says, I mean, this kid does not cry. And he says, you know what that means? And he says, this baby is going to be a very content person. He's going to grow up to be a very content person. And I did. Am I not content? Do I look content? I am. So.
Well, now I'm going to ask you this right here. What else came across your mind other than what you end up doing? Was there something else that you said, well, maybe, but it just didn't happen? What else do you think Robert Vincent Sims might have been good at other than?
Nobody has ever asked me that in my life, and I'm shocked that you even asked me that. And nobody knows the answer I'm going to give this, not even my wife, not even my family, because there's no reason, because I took the path that I took and I loved it. The only other thing that I think I would have had a natural ability that I would have enjoyed, and that is to, I'm shocked to even say this, but to be a preacher of sorts, of positive messages. And I like storytelling. So as a matter of fact, I used to, I had a friend, her name was Catherine Isgett. She called herself a little old lady in tennis shoes. And we had no generation gap we became best friends, like family. And she loved plants and I loved plants. And we just adored each other, and we just gabbed and talked all about plants. And she would have Dr. Robert Schuller on from the Crystal Cathedral on Sundays. And I think I was influenced by that. I think, you know, he was an interesting speaker. He was a little dramatic and things like that, but he kept your attention, and but he was a international speaker, and I think that probably influenced me some, and I think I could have done that and been happy.
I have to say this right at this particular moment, because as I'm sitting here just before he asked you that question, I said he would make a great motivational speaker. I mean, like an inspirational speaker. That was literally what I thought.
Really?
In my mind,
Thank you.
even from our conversation at the table when you were saying follow your path, and
Yes.
so then he asked you that question. I know you said preacher, but then you said speaker
Yes.
as well, and because you're very inspiring and uplifting, and people like that energy.
Thank you.
So the fact that that was your answer.
Well, yes, it kind of makes sense. But if you think about it, sometimes, and I have done inspirational speaking. I've taken groups of hundreds of people to Alaska in the past, and my friend Catherine that I just mentioned, I did a whole hour talk, inspirational, about her life story. She's a whole show in herself. You talk about someone that inspired me. She and her husband, they got married. They had $127 from their marriage. This was like in the 1940s, and they came to Florida, and they were going to decide where they're going to live. And when they ran out of money, they ended up in Fort Lauderdale, and that's where they ended up living.
Wow.
But she was an inspiration to me because she came from nothing, and they built businesses, and she got to the point where the husband wouldn't build any more businesses, and she says, "That's okay, honey. Our son Larry will go in business with me." And then she'd make this $1 million business with Larry.
Wow.
There was no stopping her, and that's the key. When you know you have a fire burning in your belly, don't allow anybody's comment or anybody's idea to interfere or throw a round barrel in your path. Go around it, over it, and all, because deep down, when you're centered, and the more centered you are, the more we can navigate life and create this happy dream that we're going through now in this life.
Right off let me ask you this right here. Thinking back, your teachers, which ones influenced you the most? Which one you remember that influenced you the most? Was it elementary school, junior high school?
Oh, easy peasy. I had a lot of negative teachers, actually. I had some bad teachers. I had to get out of the math class because he was really bad. He was really mean, and he would yell, and he would take erasers and throw it hard at the kids. Can you imagine? And it's like, I never saw anything like that in my life.
Wow.
And I'm like, who does this? Is this candid camera? What is this? But I had a English teacher, my first English teacher in college. Her name was Dr. Margaret Maney, and she became my best friend. And she became a mentor, and I became her mentor. And at the time I was moving to Central Florida, she coincidentally was moving to Central Florida and becoming the provost at Seminole Community College. So we became like family because we didn't know anybody, right? And so I would say Dr. Margaret Maney, and now I'm best friends. She would spend Christmas with our family. We would have dinners together, and now I'm still friends with her family. She's passed on. She's made her transition, and I'm still friends with her family.
Wow. People, because I've learned so much about you when I call, because you shared some things. But like I said, Vince, when you talk, it all belongs in the box. Now, I don't mean the box as in negative. I meant who you are, your spirit, you following your path, you believing in yourself, the things that you have accomplished, what people see and hear. It all goes into the box where you are. It's just like this fit, and it just makes so much sense that you are who you are, and you've done what you have, your accomplishments, and
but it took a village. All these people that we talked about,
Right.
on the 9th Street where I spent that one year at grandparents' house, all of those people, they weren't people, they were angels. They were taking me to the next level starting early. And what was the common denominator that all 4 of those neighbors had? They had a positive attitude. They had a connection to spirit. They had results. They believed, they had goals. They would set the goals, and they loved nature. And so because they loved nature, the cards came out like this, and I won the lottery, so to speak, because they were my stepping stone to bigger and better and things. And it's been the most exciting life. I loved every minute of it because I love immersing myself in nature.
On another note, which France shares with me sometimes what her life was like with the village, and she shares what her life was like without the village, and the difference in what the village makes, because that's the way it's supposed to be.
Yes.
There's a big difference when you have the village.
There's a big, but you have to be receptive to the village. The village could be there. The village is always there. But if you put up the barriers and you keep putting rocks in the path or creating these illusions, you have to understand the mindset is there are no barriers. We create our own greatness. We create what we want to do. The goal is to live this life and say, well done, and have God say that.
I'm going to ask you, I guess, an obvious question. I don't know if it's a good question, but the last time I saw you, you were not a parent.
That's right.
So what is it like now that you're a parent?
I was so fortunate that both kids were so easy to raise. They never gave us a lot of trouble. And, and I give June, my wife, really 99% of the credit, to tell you the truth. She is from Guyana, South America.
Before you finish, I just want you to know you're being really smart right now, but go ahead.
I'm being very truthful, too. And so you're right. There's going to be some brownie points as an afterthought. You're right. But she, in Guyana, it was a British colony, and in South America, it was the only English-speaking country, and that's where she was raised. Her father was in charge of customs of the country at the time, but they immigrated to America. Like so many people want to be in the greatest country in the world, and that's what they did. But in there, they had 5 kids, and she also had great parents, and when they came home from school, each child, they're all 5 kids, all a year apart. Can you imagine? And they, in what she did, each child tutored the other kid. So we did the same thing. When our kids were this big, they were being tutored. We hired tutors. We tutored them and things like that. And I think that talking and that strive, there's no, what is the point of being average? Who wants to go through life and say, I just love being average? We need to, I have a saying that is my life saying, and it's simple, and it's max out your life. Well, that's what we've taught our kids. And you ask about the kids. One thing that I didn't do that I would love either one of them to do is go into the family business. That's every parent's dream that has a business. It really is. But I also know if that's not God's plan, then that's not what I want either. I want them to know, and so both of them want to be physicians. They were highly influenced by both of their uncles who are physicians, and they connected with that, and God bless them, they're thriving in medical school.
Again, just from the parent aspect, your oldest is a son.
Yes.
Okay. So what was it like when you found out you was going to have a daughter?
Well, he was supposed to be a daughter. Yeah, the doctor said 100% you're having a daughter. And I was best friends with the station manager.
That's funny.
It was. I was best friends with the station manager at WDBO, where I work now. For 42 years, I've been in radio. And his wife made these pink blankets, pink everything. And it was those things. And we're there in the delivery. He's like, "You got a boy?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? You know, is this my wife? Like, we're having a girl." You know, and so it's just been amazing having boys. In fact, it's funny thing about kids. I tell everybody, remember, you know, the Flintstones cartoon. Remember, there was Bam Bam, the strong little. We raised Bam Bam. When he was in high school, he got into weightlifting. Well, he had an influential guy that influenced him, right? A coach who was also a teacher. And my son became he broke 7 records nationally and became the national powerlifting champion. Breaking 7 records, not 1 record. And I'm like, June, we raised Bam Bam. You know, this is a big accomplishment, I think.
That's awesome.
But just to end the funny story, he came to me, he said, after the competition, he says, "I'm retiring from this." And I said, "Really?" And I said, "You know, your mother thinks this is really good for you." And I said, "Do you think you should talk to your mother?" He says, "No." And I said, I think you should. He says, "Well, if she wants me to continue, she can lift the weights." So he was bold. He said, "No, I know what I want. It's done. I accomplished it. I'm moving on to medical school."
So what was it like when you brought home Pebbles?
Ariana is a really intuitive kid. I'm going to tell you a shocking short story. Shocking. Talk about spirit. Oh my gosh. Are you sitting down? Okay. She was just learning to talk, and she was, and sweet little adorable, kind soul. We knew she had a beautiful soul and spirit. She did not know about Sunday school. She had never been to Sunday school. She was tiny, you know, and stuff like that. But she was able to talk. So I go in to tuck her in at night. All right, I've never told this story ever in my life, and this is a total personal, private story. And I go in there and we talk. We say our "I love yous." We do prayers, you know. And she was on her back and she was squinting her eyes like this, closing them like this, and then opening them, and not talking. And I said, "Honey, what are you doing? What's going on?" And she said, "I'm trying to remember what heaven was like."
Wow.
And
Oh my God.
I got all hot inside. I'm like, we haven't even had discussions about this. This is like a few years in the future. And I walked out of that room like a zombie. I'm kind of feeling that feeling now. And I said, June, come here. What is it?" And I told her what happened, and she's like, "Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh." So when God gives you a gift, you know, and she's very intuitive, and she you know, an old soul like we are, and I know you have lots of stories too. And what is our common denominator? We're grateful for that gift. But I want you can have the gift, but if you don't pay attention, you don't absorb the gift. So friends, be grateful. Everybody has gifts. We just have to remove the blocks and barriers to allow our light to shine. You know, let our little light shine. That's right. Let it shine vibrationally. Let it literally shine, and make an effort to be an impact on others.
Wow, that is a great story.
Very profound.
You know, I'm hoping that you will come back on the show so we can talk more about some questions I have, in addition to the gifts. But I have questions about my my mango tree,
Okay.
avocados.
Now, you know I've answered those questions thousands of times, so I'll try to answer it with enthusiasm when we do the show.
Now,
I know what you're going to say when you start a question about avocado before you even finish it.
But, and the one thing that I've never been able to grow, well, let me say this right here. I think I shared this with you. But growing up, my aunt, we had a garden.
Mm-hmm.
So we grew corn, peanuts, carrots, collard greens, and some other vegetables, beans and stuff like that. Peanuts. The one thing that I could never grow was watermelon. I have no idea why.
There's something wrong, because that watermelon is one of the easiest plants to grow. So I don't know what happened to you.
Yeah,
because and also it's one of the most nutrient-rich fruits. It's the most delicious. Everybody loves it.
Right,
You know,
right.
It's the most beautiful. You know, it's just beautiful to look at.
Okay.
Everything's beautiful about it. The stripes. You know, there's round ones. There's medium ones. There's giant ones. It's like,
Okay, well, that's one of the things that we're definitely going to talk about the next time I have you come on the show.
But let me tell you what else we need to talk about.
Okay.
Growing your own food. I've been telling my audience for years, every human being needs to know how to grow their own food. Watermelons, pumpkins, vegetables, all of that. You know,
We'll see. Great. Next show. The show is called Growing Your Own Food.
That's right.
It's coming straight from the Garden Rebel. Well, Ben, thank you so much for taking the time to come on the show. Also, France, and for sharing your stories. I look forward to you guys. It's great seeing you too, Vince. I mean, it's been so many years.
We're friends from the beginning,
right?
And now you introduced me. Oh my gosh! France is one of a kind, so
right.
I feel very grateful.
All right, well.
And I want to come back with France too, because I have a lot of questions. She and I could talk about entertainment all forever.
All right. All right, that's Robert Vincent Sims. Everybody knows him as the Garden Rebel, all right?
So GardenRebel.com is the website.
You hear that? GardenRebel.com is the website.
All right. Well, you've heard the story of the inspiration between France Neal and Robert Vincent Sims. You can go to GardenRebel.com and check him out. I'm hoping that you're going to come back on the show and share what people want to hear when it comes to Robert Vincent Sims, when is it that I should fertilize my sunflowers? So on and so forth. But this is the Journey 2020, and with we want to thank France Neal and also the Garden Rebel for taking the time to come on the show, and he promised me that he's going to come back on the show. And for questions, comments, and concerns, make sure that you hit us up with an email. And remember to check out the Pastor's Roundtable. You know, in the times that we're in, you know, make sure that you say an extra prayer for the victims, so many, Croatia, the list goes on and on. The guy down the street, the lady across the street, such and such around the block, the people we pass every day that's just looking for some food. So it's not always what you think, but if we can separate ourselves and get into the right spirit and just don't take it personal, just serve. That's all I say. Do the best that you can to serve. And remember the Pastor's Roundtable. It comes to you monthly. And I'm Charles Morris. This is the Journey 2020. Enjoy the rest of the week. As they say, the word comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of the Lord. You be blessed.